Well, good afternoon, everybody. I want to welcome everyone to our District Leadership Institute and to our Lions Club Treasurer webinar. These are definitely unprecedented times, and I'm sorry that we're not able to do this in person, but we are doing the best job that we can, and I guarantee you that you will come away this afternoon with some good information. I'm going to welcome our two presenters, our past Council Chair, Lion Ken Tucker, and past District Governor Lion Mary Crow. Before I hand that webinar over to them, I will let you know that you are able to ask questions on your little toolbar. There should be a question box there where you can type in some questions for the presenters. Our co-organizers with us today are District Governor-elect Frank Rowe and Lion Paula Roswell. We will read those questions and let the presenter know that there are questions available for them. So we'll try to get to those. Anything that's not answered, both our presenters are available via email and phone calls. I'm sure they will make themselves available to help you out. The webinar is being recorded as well, so we will offer that sometime next week. And at this time, I'm going to welcome our current District Governor, Diana Grisey, and she has a few opening remarks for us. Good morning, good afternoon, Governor.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much, PDG Keith. It's so nice to see you all here, and I'm happy that so many incoming officers are able to participate today. I'd like to thank past District Governor Keith for putting this all together. This is our first webinar, and for serving as GLT coordinator for this past year. I also like to thank District Governor-elect Frank for technically setting up this webinar with the help of Paula Roswell. Thank you, Paula. And to all our experienced line presenters for participating today. Where there is a need, there is a lion, has certainly held true in this extraordinary time. I'd like to thank you all for your innovative ways of serving safely. This is a new way of training, but I think that this is one of the positive things that have come out of going through this pandemic. Change can be hard for some of us, but by being forced to use other means of communication, social media, we have moved into the future. It gives more people the opportunity to participate, and people might be more apt to take on positions or roles that they may not have felt they had time to before. I hope you consider continuing using social media. I know quite a few clubs have been doing it, and they have gotten used to it, and they do enjoy it. Of course, we miss the social time a little bit, but we'll get back to that. We have great presenters today, so sit back, relax, and pay attention so you don't miss any of the helpful information. Thank you for your support and service this year. I'd like to congratulate District Governor-elect Frank as incoming governor, and I believe we will have a successful year under his insightful leadership. Hope everyone has a great summer. Stay well and safe. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Governor. All right, so at this point, I am going to hand things over to our presenters. We are going to save a few minutes towards the end for a few closing remarks from District Governor-elect Frank Rowe. So enjoy this, and I will sign back on at the end of the webinar. Good luck, you guys. You got it.
Thank you, PG Keith, and thank you for your remarks, District Governor Diana. So let me explain a little bit of kind of what's going to happen during this particular webinar. I'm going to do the first half of it, and then Mary, PDG Mary is going to take over and finish up the second half. If you do have any questions, as PDG Keith has indicated, please make sure that you type them in so Lion Paula can get them and get them to us as presenters. She may or may not present them as you ask them, but we'll try to get as many of them as we can. Typically, as we do these seminars, we know that when we're doing them all together, concurrently, everybody's kind of in their own little niche. So today's an opportunity that I may have some presidents, or Mary may have some presidents on this, as well as secretaries of membership. But at the same time, this one's for club treasurer. I know we have some of our district officers on, so welcome all. To start out with, before we get to a couple of poll questions that I'm going to have, I want to let you know that there's some references out there that you can avail yourselves to. We deliberately did not send them to you at this point in time. We wanted to go through our presentation, and then you can back them up with this information. So the first one is a Treasurer's Seminar Guidebook. I have a list of all the registrants, and either this evening or tomorrow, I will be sending everybody a copy of the Treasurer's Seminar Guidebook. It's a little dated. The last time it was updated was 2011. So if you see an inconsistency in what's in the handbook with what we present today, just remember that it's quite a bit later, and we are probably going to give you the most accurate information. The other information that I wanted to mention to you is if you go online to lionsclubs.org and just type in the search engine, under the search engine, treasurer training information, you'll get 3 different documents that are there. I have looked at all 3 of them. I did not download them because I think you can do that yourself. But one is the Club Treasurer ebook. And in that ebook, it has several different information on familiarizing yourself with MyLCI, some information as far as your club finances that you're going to hear about today, how to purchase items and monthly requirements and the like. And there's the section on there is the legalities and technicalities. There is a link also to the International Association of Club Bylaws and the Constitution of Bylaws. And the reason I did that is if you look at Article 11, it talks about the club membership and club organization. And it not only talks about the treasurer as part of that category, but the last appendix on there is actually a list of the types of members that you may have in your club, whether it's a regular member, an associate member, etc. And you can see that. It also talks about the dues breakdown on that particular resource. And the last one is just a document. It's a 4-page document on best practices for financial transparency. So there's some resources that you can get. Certainly this webinar will be available at a later date. Mary and I both will always be available for any assist or questions that you have, whether setting up before the year starts or during the year. So at this point, we've got a couple of poll questions. The first question that we're going to ask is coming up now before. So please select your answer and vote. And then when Frank is ready, he will give the answers. Okay, so we've got about 60-40 split. 60% that's not been a treasurer, 40 have. Hopefully those of you that have been a treasurer before will have the opportunity to kind of refresh the information that you have and maybe clarify any questions. The next poll question is just a little bit more specific. So Frank, if you put that one up. And when you're ready with the results, then go ahead and show those. Okay, so it's a little bit more on the yeses, 65%. So we've got a few new people, so that's a great thing. So hopefully, particularly for the new people, I will give you my contact information. Please write it down. So if you have any questions, first of all, my email is lionken23c@yahoo.com. My cell phone number is 860-884-6006. So let me repeat both of those just in case I talk too fast. lionken23c@yahoo.com, 860-884-6006. So please feel free to contact me or call me if you have specific questions or something that we covered and then it came up a little bit later on, whether it's starting out, whether it's throughout the year. But you'll find that Mary and I can be a great resource for you as other folks on the cabinet. Mary, do you want to give your contact info now?
Sure. It's govmary23c@aol.com. govmary23c@aol.com or 860-977-5760. 977-5760.
Thanks, Mary. Okay, Frank, if you can go to the next slide, please. So this is our starting slide, but I want you to kind of note the wording that was on that first one. If you remember the information that you get when you're installed as a treasurer of your club, one of the first things that it says is Lion with your name. You are the chief financial officer of your club. So this seminar is all about the economics and how the club is run. You can see some of the outline of what we're going to call. We're going to talk about the duties today, how you fit into the team, particularly the different types of accounts and accounting that you'll need to do. We're going to talk about bonding, and then we're going to be switch over, and Mary's going to talk about budgets, some receipts and disbursements along with that budget, the reports that you have to prepare, what kind of information you need to provide for your meetings, whether it's a club meeting or a board meeting. The tools and technology, that's changed over time, but technology seems to be an ever-increasing aspect of what we do. The need to have an audit and additional knowledge and turnover when you get ready to end your year. And we don't have any samples that we're going to do. This outline is typically done when we do this as a group. So you won't see any samples, but we'll review. And as you go along, if you've got questions, please bring them up. Next slide, Frank. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the duties of the treasurer. In essence, there's two aspects that go into the duties that you have. One is the money, one is the records. So the first aspect are the receipts and deposits. Before we get started, the last part of the records talks about checkbook. Many clubs have at least two accounts for their club. One is their administrative account, and one is their charities or their community account, depends on what they call it. There are other clubs that have other checkbooks for other reasons, separate checking accounts. And there are a few clubs that just have one checkbook. So it's really a club decision and a treasurer decision of how you do that. The most important part is hopefully by the time that you take office this year, those of you that are continuing on in that role, and those of you that are going to be new into the role, that you have a good grasp of what the previous year has been. So whether it's somebody coming new, if that's the case, you need to have the conversations with the previous treasurer. If there was an audit done, you should review that audit, but you should be ready to take over these checkbooks. One of the things that you're going to have to worry about doing is making sure that you go to the bank and make sure that the signature cards are on file at that bank. The way that things are now with the pandemic, you may have to call the bank for an appointment to get in there. But one of the recommendations that International has that I very strongly am in favor of is that there's at least two people that sign checks for every account and for every check that goes out. It protects you as the treasurer, which is the most important thing to me, but it also protects the club. And it makes sure that anything that happens, that there's two people that's involved in the writing of that check. The other thing that it's important to note is that, and LCI actually discusses that in their reference material, is that those two members should never be of the same family. So when it comes to receipts and deposits, let's talk a little bit about the money coming in. There's a lot of different ways that the money's going to come in. The very first thought process and concept that you need to have is that money needs to be deposited as soon as you can. Don't let it sit around. We've had clubs that have received checks or money. They set it aside thinking they're going to do it later on, and all of a sudden the check gets lost. Somebody's looking to balance their own personal checkbook and can't do that because it's still an outstanding check. And lo and behold, 6 months later, it turns up. So please have a regular routine for that. I happen to be the club treasurer of my club at this point in time, and I always, within the very next weekend, generally I do my banking on a weekend, all the deposits are made at that point in time. We have a community account and we have an administrative account. So the community account is an account that's basically for events. That's money that comes in for fundraisers, for any type of fundraising, whether it's a pancake breakfast, a pasta dinner, or something similar to that, or something that you're doing. But that money is money that's coming in from not only your club members, from the community. All that money at the end of the year should be dispersed back into the community. Your administrative account is money that can only come from either Lions members in your club or other Lions members as part of the district. That money can be used for your administration to operate. Your dues that you collect, that goes into your administrative account. As far as your payments, same answer, pay your bills promptly. You always will get twice a year 2 receipts from international and 2 receipts from the district for district dues and international dues. International looks at that very closely. When you get the bill, they are billing you for the members that are on a roll at a certain point in time. And when you get the statement either online or in the mail, it'll let you know the members that they have counted, and there's an assessment for each one of those members. And when that bill hasn't got paid for 30 days, the not only reminder goes to you, but it goes out to the district, to the district governor and the first and second vice district governor, et cetera, to make sure that they're following up on it. If it's not paid in a certain amount of time, there's always that potential that the club could lose their charter, though I've yet to see that. But our district and the clubs in our district are very prompt in doing that. The second invoice that comes through will be from our district treasurer, and our district treasurer will bill you for this dues assessment also. And those dues assessment not only are for our district, but also for the multiple district that we have here in the state. So as you get them, please pay them. Please record and keep track of not only the check number and amount that you paid and the date that you paid it, but if somebody comes back and says, listen, we're showing you that you're outstanding, you readily have that information that you can provide to answer that no, we paid it and here's the information. As far as the records go, certainly the checkbook and the ledger that's on that checkbook is important, but associated with that, each month you'll get a bank statement from the bank. I'm a strong proponent in reconciling that checkbook, and I balance our checkbooks to the penny. I do it in my home, I do it with the club, and if you do it on a regular basis, on a monthly basis, it is a lot easier. If you let it go for several months at a time, it's much more complicated. You could find entries that are not written correctly, and it doesn't match up with exactly what the bank is showing with what you have written out. So my recommendation is to reconcile your bank statement on a monthly basis to ensure that you have balanced that and you know exactly what's in your account. Certainly, with regards to the receipts, as folks come in and pay their dues, you're going to need to give them a receipt to show them that they're paid. Please be flexible with your members. There are all sorts of members that we have in different financial status, particularly with this pandemic. There are some that, and most of them pay at the beginning of the year, they're able to pay their full amount. But there may be some that are having difficulty paying, and a quiet conversation with them from either yourself or somebody that's close to them may determine that they may not be able to pay the full amount that the club has designated. And we've got a couple of members like that. And if they pay us $10 at a time, or $5 at a time, or $20 at a time, that works. I keep those records and I keep that quiet so as not to embarrass them. But no matter whether I get the full amount of the dues or I get a partial payment, I write out a receipt to a receipt book that's provided to them. I also keep ledgers, and in a ledger book, I manually keep it. You can certainly keep it online if you're proficient in that. I'm from the old school, so I kind of do that manual thing. But I actually have a ledger book for the receipts and for the payments that go out. And as backup to those, I actually have different pages for different fundraisers, for different accounts. Like if I'm collecting dues, for example, for 2021, I'm going to list all the members' names and the date that they paid it, whether they paid it by check or by cash, whether they paid it partial. And I'll turn the page and it may be something else that's club related that we've had to buy stamps or we've had to buy supplies from LCI. And I do the same thing with the community account identically, so I can keep track of it and at a look. And the benefit of that is somebody comes to me at a board meeting, or if somebody comes to me at a regular club meeting and they say, can you tell me how much money we made at this particular fundraisers? I can go to that ledger book specifically because my deposits are made as the income comes in, and that sometimes is over a 2 or 3 week period. But I can look at that ledger book and I can see very clearly the income that we made out of that, the expenses to run that particular event, and then the total profit that was made from that event. And it gives me that at a snapshot. So I'm a big proponent of using a ledger book. The last thing on this particular slide I'd like to talk about is the budget. Every club should have a budget. And as the chief financial officer and treasurer of your club, you should be foremost looking at that with a committee that hopefully the president of that club has set up. And my club is small. We use a 2-person committee. Our budget doesn't change much from year to year. If it's a larger club, you may have to have 3 or 4 people in that. But you're looking at 2 aspects of it. First of all, in the community account, we review each year what are the folks that at the end of the year we're hoping to give the money to. And we're basing our budget on the previous years that we've done, particularly the last year, but we kind of look at the group of the last 2 or 3 years particularly. And the first thing we look at is, do we want to give that money to the same charities that we've given? We split ours up between Lions charities and community charities about 50-50. Every club is different and you can do it any way that the club determines. But when you do that, you're coming up with not only the charity, but an estimated amount of what you think that you're going to provide to them. So understand that it's an estimated amount, because at the end of the day, a budget is just that. It's not something that should be locked in stone, that can't be modified or changed. The greatest example of that happens to be because of this pandemic. Our club happened to get most of our fundraisers done, and our last one was done in early March, just before the pandemic hit. So the bulk of our money came in, and we were able to actually meet our obligations through our budget. But there are many clubs, particularly this year, that still were waiting to have some major fundraisers after the pandemic hit, and that had to cancel. Your budget at that point went out the window to some extent and needs to be readjusted. And hopefully those that are involved in that process that are continuing treasurers know that, and they had to go back and look at the charities and the amounts that they were going to donate so they could determine how they could change the budget that was originally drafted. The obligation that you have at that point is to inform the club that, listen, we originally started out with this much money in our budget for the community or for the administrative, and we're not going to meet that based on the lack of income coming in because we had to cancel these fundraisers. I've met with the budget committee, and at this point, we've changed the budget to reflect our current situation, and therefore, this is what we think our new budget should look like, and that should be presented to the board of directors, who in turn should vote on that, agree upon that, hopefully, or make some changes, and then be brought to your full membership. The same thing, similarly, should happen with your administrative account. It's a little bit more fixed only because of your dues collection is the majority of what comes in that administrative account. So as you collect your dues, hopefully most of your budgetary items are met, but there are things that come up from time to time that you anticipated that didn't, and you're going to have to possibly change that. Certainly expenditures would have to change. Go ahead, Frank. So as that report, you have an obligation to report to the board of directors and the membership, as I indicated. Remember, you should be the committee chairperson for that budget report and for all the finances that happen. And depends on, particularly with the budget aspect, you should have at least one other person, depends on the size of the club or other people that you're collaborating with. As far as other duties goes, you are a board member in your particular club. So, and in your governor's, your president's organization, as well as a secretary and a membership chairperson. So you're an officer of that club. You sit on the board of directors. As a board of directors, your job is to give the financial information that needs to be presented to that. You also, as I indicated, are the finance committee chair. So you need to kind of make sure that you have your finger trip. Be prepared at these meetings to present your information to your club. I think Mary's going to talk about that a little bit later with that budget. The other thing that you should consider, and it depends on the amount of money that you bring into your club. It also depends on how careful that the club is. But we have done in our club for at least 15 or 20 years a surety bond. It's usually to an insurance company. It costs us $100 a year to have that surety bond done. But what that bond does is it protects the club from any money that may be misappropriated, and more importantly, it protects you as a club treasurer to make sure that things are done in the right way. I like that concept. We've never had a problem in our club with any inappropriate financial aspects of it, but there are horror stories that I've heard over the years of me being a Lion that makes me understand that $100 spent, and that money, if you spend it and it's $100 or whatever it costs, depends on which insurance company you're using. Some of it will have different rates based on the income that you're going to be having in your particular club, but it is well worth that money. That should be budgeted under your administrative budget. Lastly, you are a team member with the rest of the officers on that club. The club members are going to look at you as an officer and as that team member, but they're expecting you to be technically proficient and to make sure that you're providing the information not only a timely basis, but on an accurate basis. Next slide, Frank. So 2 aspects of being the management team. First of all, through the installation of officers, you can see the last group that gets done is the treasurer, the secretary, and then the president. And that's because those 3 positions are the management team, in a nutshell, for the most part, of your particular club. It is up to you as treasurer to share that information with your secretary. You'll work with that secretary on receipts. The way that actually income should come into the club, particularly through the club meetings, is it gets presented to the secretary. The secretary puts that in the minutes that money was received for whatever reason it may be, and then that secretary passes it on to the treasurer. It's kind of an old-fashioned way, but it's a way to doubly record that amount of money that comes in. So if a question comes up later on to an audit, or if a question comes on to an inappropriate concern, that both the secretary and the treasurer can show an indication of how that money came in and where it came in at that point in time. There are some money as treasurer that's going to come through the mail, and at that point you need to share that with the folks at your board meetings. And certainly all that information should be passed on through the president. Please make sure that you coordinate activities. All the information that happens not only as team members to be part of a club, but as a management team needs to be coordinated with one another. Some of the information that you do as far as your budgetary items on a fundraiser or on a particular thing may also be interrelated with somebody that's doing marketing or promotion for that particular fundraisers, and there may be expenditures through that. Those expenditures should not be done without your knowledge of that and your approval based on a budget that may have been filled out because of that particular event. And the biggest part, of course, is you support one another. By supporting one another, you are supporting the club and making your club more successful. There are certain functions that happen throughout the year. This year it's been a little different with the convention of the district events. But first of all, as you were inducted or should have had in your induction, part of the ceremony states that you are part of the district governor's advisory team and that you will attend the quarterly meetings of your zone. So as the management team, the president, the secretary, and treasurer, not only do you have responsibilities to your club, but you're the club's liaison to the governor. And through that, the governor has appointed not only a region chair, but a zone chair to oversee the workings of that club. Your zone chair should be your closest confidant and be able to assist you in any of the day-to-day information that happens, not only through being a treasurer, but also in providing information from the governor's cabinet down to the club level and vice versa. So I would strongly recommend that as a treasurer that you attend the zone meetings of your district or of your particular zone. You're generally comprised of not only your zone chairperson and people that they have that'll come and discuss different events that's happening in the district, but it's the most rewarding part of it to me is having the other clubs come in and talk about some of the things that they're going on. And as a treasurer, other treasurers that are there, you can collaborate with them of any issue that you may or may not have. Sometimes they're asking, we've got this going on, what are you seeing at your end of it? So it allows you to provide feedback in a positive manner to other club treasurers. It's also an opportunity to ask questions of someone that's been around for quite a while. As far as conventions go, the district generally has 2 conventions that we do. The Midwinter Conference is generally in the spring, early spring, late winter, if you will, and that's held, and the purpose of that is basically to present seminars, to do some camaraderie, to have some business meetings, but to have a great time. That's more of the fun event that we see in our particular district. The state convention is generally held toward the end of the year, and that's when we elect our district governors. Our vice district governors are generally elected most of the time, I think, at that time also, but the information that's provided in the nominating speeches are done most of the time at the state midwinter convention for the first and second vice district governor, and for the state convention for the district governor. There's also, of course, the international convention. It was supposed to be in Asia this year. That got canceled also. The other convention that is technically probably the best for training is our USA Canada Forum. If you haven't been to one, I will strongly encourage it. There's probably 60 or 70 seminars there. There's some very specific to the treasurer. Take an opportunity also to attend some of the district events that's around. What I've found is, especially when it comes as treasurer and trying to figure out if you're going to meet your budgets and trying to raise money, the more events that you attend around your district and around your zone, the more of the cabinet people will attend your events. They get to know you, you get to know them. And if you don't attend or if you don't collaborate with those folks, I see less of attendance from some of the other clubs, particularly at your own functions. And lastly, please attend all your club events. That's your responsibility. You may be able to collect, be responsible for collecting money at these events, but it's a great way, again, to make sure that the functions are supported by you as a treasurer. Next slide, Frank. Okay, so we talked about our accounts and our accounting. And remember, the administrative fund only comes from members and in-house activities. It cannot come from anybody from the community. If you do a raffle that's going to, or some sort of a fundraiser, whether it's a basket thing or some sort of aspect that's only for your administrative fund, you cannot sell raffle tickets, or you cannot sell those type of tickets to members of the community. That can only come from Lions in your club or Lions that are in the district. And again, that's for in-house activities. That will not only be for things that happen within your club of the convention. It may be stamps, it may be that surety bond I talked to. It may be something else that you need to do. We typically, if we have a district governor's gift that we want to buy for a particular district governor, we'll take that out of that account. If we want to pay for someone to attend the awards banquet, that comes out of our account because money came from the club, and that recipient that we're nominating to the governor, if that's paid from the club, that actually comes out of the administrative account. So it's Lions to Lions, it's the administrative fund, and any expenses that may come for club administration, whether it's stamps or whether it's coming for something I just mentioned, that'll strictly come from the administrative fund. Next part, Frank. And then your activities fund, that's labeled in different ways. That activities fund could also be labeled our charities fund. It could be our community fund. It's all kind of the same terminology that we're using to kind of get to the same point. But that strictly is income that's from the public. And it may come from Lions for a particular fundraiser, but it's income that generally is coming in from the public, and those are the net proceeds that are donated. Understand that it's not the gross proceeds, it's the net. So if you do a fundraiser and you have to pay a small amount, or you have to donate a certain amount for the facility to be able to host that event, or you have to buy some, if it's say a pancake breakfast, you got to buy the pancake mix and the eggs and whatever goes with that. That can come from that net proceeds from the gross. At the end of the day, the cost to put that fundraiser on is the gross. Once you take the cost out of what it takes, the money left over is your net proceeds. Those go into your activities fund. It cannot be used for club administration. And Lions International recommends that those proceeds get donated at the end of the year. Many clubs do have their evening of giving or their night of giving that they do provide. And that is a fun way not only to have people that's going to receive the money to come in and talk for a couple of seconds about, or a couple of minutes about their particular charity or location that you're donating the money to, but it's also a great way to show the club members what we're doing as a club with the money that we raised with their hard work. That's the biggest positive to me, that the club members directly see each year that we worked hard for our money. We kind of talk about the events that we had to raise that money, and then we're happy to give that money out. And by having the recipients there, it adds not only gratification for our club members, but it lets the club members know in a first-hand basis on who's receiving that money. Frank? Okay, as I indicated at the very beginning, and some of this is repetitious, but I want to make sure that we cover them fully. And if you hear things once, that's great. You hear it twice, you remember a little bit better. And if we do it a third time, you know, hopefully that you'll just bear with us if we do. But basically, when it comes to the checkbook, some clubs have one for both funds. Our club has two separate accounts. There are some that have a community fund, a charities fund. I know of clubs that have a separate checkbook because they have scholarship funds. Some of the larger clubs that run the fairs will have multiple accounts because of that, or larger events, and they may have that. When I was running for district governor, we actually created a separate account strictly just for that. That was separate from the club, called the Promote Mohegan Pequot account, and we had a checkbook for that. So there's different reasons why you may have that. Again, please make sure that you deposit the money and that you write checks for the money that's expended on a timely basis, that you annotate the information in that checkbook and you write your checks on a timely basis. I can't reemphasize that enough. Secondly, as far as your ledger, particularly if you have one account, you definitely need to have some sort of ledger or accounting system to make sure that you're breaking up those two community and charities, so you actually know at a glance what check is going where. The problem with the one checkbook is sometimes you make a mistake and you'll receive dues and put it in your community, or you'll write a check out and put it in activities or into your administration inappropriately. So having them separate eliminates that that practice, first of all, and also that mistake that potentially can happen. And again, please reconcile your checkbook. If you don't do it, the longer you wait to reconcile a checkbook, the more mistakes you're going to have, and the harder it is to determine, particularly at the end of the year, how much money you're going to be able to give out because your checkbook's not right. I mentioned that your files, you're certainly going to have your bank statements. Each checkbook will have their own statement. Please file them accordingly after you do your reconciliation. Any receipts that come in, please make sure that you're filing them. Now, when it comes to receipts and expenditures, you probably should consider, if you don't have it already, a minimum number, dollar amount of how much can be expended without having a receipt. For example, if you buy stamps, does the club require you to have a receipt for every time that a book of stamps is purchased or not? Or is it over $50 and then a receipt or a statement has to be provided? That's particularly important, not only for you as club treasurer, but for your club members that may be also expending money. The last thing you want to see is that somebody spends money and then they put it into you for reimbursement, and it's not authorized, or it's much more than you anticipated because it was not clear guidelines on how much they could spend. So if someone else is expending that money, please make sure that they have a clear understanding of how much they can spend and not to go over that. Most of our motions that we make in our club and that I've seen in a lot of levels is such and such is allowed to spend up to whatever the dollar amount, not to exceed that dollar amount. And we have a standard practice in our club that anything over $50 has to have a receipt, or I don't cut a check for that dollar amount, no matter what it's for and how important that is, if that person does require a reimbursement. And generally, when I know that they're going to be writing a check out personally or using their credit card or paying cash for that, I'm telling them up front that please make sure that I get a receipt. I cannot cut you a check without that. You control that, but if you have those checks and balances, you'll be able to be successful in making sure that you'll be able to reconcile your bank statements, and you're going to be able to appropriately report back to the club administration and the team of, particularly the board, of the actions that you've taken. Lastly, there could be some correspondence that comes in. Please make sure you handle that appropriately and report that, whether it's correspondence regarding money or not, to the board, and if appropriate, to your regular meetings. Frank? And I mentioned the security bond, the surety bond. Make sure that with that security bond, that it covers the club assets. If you've got a bond for $10,000, but you're bringing in $50,000, you need to make sure that that bond is high enough to cover any expenditure or any income that may be coming in through the club. Again, it does protect you as a treasurer itself. God forbid you're getting ready to make a deposit at the bank and something happens where you get robbed, the deposit doesn't show up at the bank because you got in an automobile accident, and things happen along the way, but it does prevent any fraud that could happen throughout for any reason, and generally that happens from an insurance company. So at this point, I'm getting ready to turn this over to PDG Mary for the next segment. If there's any questions, please get them into Paula so she can ask them. Paula, do you have any questions at all?
No questions at the moment.
All right, so thanks, folks. I'll be around until the end of the seminar. Mary's going to take over. And if there's any questions along the way, please get to Paula. Next up is PDG Mary Crow.
Thanks, PCC Ken. Okay, now I'm going to put everyone to work. Please pick up your pens and your papers. We're going to work on an administrative budget. Please write down the amount of your yearly dues. Deduct from that $43 for Lions International, and deduct $885 from that. Now, multiply that figure by the number of members in your club. If you don't know exactly, estimate. That figure minus, if your club is under 25, minus 1 dues from that. If your club is over 25 but less than 50, minus 2. If your club is over 50, minus 3 dues. And that, what you're just minusing now is you're bound to get 1 or 2 people that for one reason or another does not pay their dues. And it also gives us a cushion for a life member or for a family member. But this is the approximate figure of guaranteed income from your club for admin. Now from that, make up a figure that you're going to pay for postage and printing and supplies. Hopefully, you'll have a membership drive or public relations. You may print brochures. So you can minus $150 to $200 for that. If we get a new club, and we know we're going to get one, you may give them a charter gift, or you may go to an anniversary for another club. That comes from that. Insurance. Insurance is a biggie. The surety bond is really something that you should consider. No matter how good your officers are. Let me tell you a story of a couple years ago from one of our clubs. The treasurer is outstanding, great treasurer. He got sidetracked when he was leaving an event. And in his bank deposit envelope, he had $5,000. When he got home, he realized he didn't have it. He never put it in his car. He put it on the trunk of the car. He drove down the street. It fell off the car. A bicyclist happened to find it. And the bank envelope had the name of the bank on it. And the bicyclist brought it to the bank. The treasurer was beside himself. Honest mistake. It could happen to any of us. He was lucky, to say the least. Another insurance that our club has that you should consider is an insurance to protect your members. Lions International's insurance does not pay for any Lions if there's an accident. One of our members, about 3 or 4 years ago, was collecting placemats at a senior dinner, fell on the floor, broke her leg. She had insurance, but she ended up in a nursing home because of the leg. Our insurance paid off. Last year, one of our members choked on a piece of meat, went to the clinic. From the clinic, they sent him by ambulance to a hospital, and he ended up with surgery. He had insurance, but there was about $5,000 that was not paid by insurance. Our insurance paid it. So if your club can afford it, I highly recommend you would get it through a private insurance agency, insurance to cover that. Conventions. Do you pay for your presidents to go to their convention, or do you pay for their dinners at their zone meetings? Deduct a figure from that. Seminars, that comes out of it. How about awards at the end of the year? Not the key awards, not the Melvin Jones or the Ambassador of Sites, but do you give club awards? That comes out of admin too. And more than likely, you have a negative. So somehow you have to create extra money for your admin because you can't take it out of your activities. Some clubs have in-house raffles, but remember, it only has to be from Lions members. Tail twister fines are needed. Member purchases. When we get a new member, we give them a t-shirt and a hat. So when we sell them to our regular members, we always add a couple extra dollars for that. Dinner meetings is a plus and a minus. We always try to add a couple dollars on to our dinner meetings. So when we have a guest, we can pay for them. Now, speaking of guests, for your governor's visit, most clubs will pay for the governor, they'll pay for the region chair, the zone chair, and their spouses. When the zone chairs and the region chairs come for other visits, you don't have to pay for their meals. Most clubs can't afford it, so don't feel obligated to. Because the admin fund, in most instances, is a real tight budget for you. You should go over it with your team, your president, your secretary, and your finance committee, so you'll know exactly what you can and can't do. Activities accounts. Your activity budget is a little different. Your activity budget, before you do any event, especially this year, you should have a budget for the event. What may sound like a good idea may not be. An example could be, we thought of having a craft fair. By the time if we had 30 crafters and charged them each $40, by the time we paid for the advertising and paid for the place event, there wasn't that much. So we thought, well, maybe we could have an auction on top of that. But you really gotta, before you do any activity, look at the budget. The problem we're gonna have this year is with the pandemic, a lot of our major club fundraisers have disappeared. The fairs are gone. A lot of the cooking events are gone. So you can't compare what you did last year to this year. You're gonna have to be creative, and you may have to cut back on expenses. And the cabinet chairs understand. If you've always given, we'll say, $1,000 to LCIF, I happen to be multiple district chair of LCIF. If you got to cut it back to $250 this year, $250 is better than nothing. It's something we have to do. Next slide, please. you have to get receipts and also for disbursements. If you are a 501c3, please be careful. If you write a check for a 501c3, it has to be from that check. Lion member Joe cannot give you a receipt that's where he wrote out of his checkbook. It's not allowed for the 501c3s. Do clubs do it? Absolutely, but be certain. Raffles, make sure that they go into the admin fund. If you are having a raffle where it's going to the public, please make sure you get a permit for it, especially now that before the permits were given by the state. Now they're given by the local PDs. Don't put your PD in an awkward position by advertising a raffle and not having a permit. If you get a raffle for your activity fund, make sure you get the permit. Deposit money promptly. What I normally do, whether I'm district treasurer or club treasurer, I have various envelopes with me. If I'm at a meeting, if someone gives me dues money, I put it in an envelope that says dues. I put it in a money for raffle. So when I get home that night, there's no guessing. I know exactly what everything goes. Or I give them all receipts. Next slide, please. Next, okay. Disbursements. It basically speaks for itself. We spoke about dues. The dues you're going to be billed in July 1st and also again in January 1st. So please watch your dues that are coming in. If you know someone's is PCC Ken stated, if someone is struggling financially, give them the option of paying just a little. Because if your admin fund is short and you can't pay the district or the international dues, you cannot borrow it from your activities fund. All the governors, when they take their oath of office, one part states that if a club is commingling funds, that their charter will be pulled. It's never happened, but it can. Next slide. Reports. For every meeting, the treasurer should have a report, a more detailed report to the board of directors. At our board of directors, we compare the budget so we know where we stand. We know if we have to change the budget. We also go over who hasn't paid their dues. You don't want to do it at a general meeting with the dues, but you should do it at the board of directors. The summary status reports, it should show the difference between the two. And if there's any club fundraisers, you should be able to give a full report of the club fundraiser, how much you took in, where you spent the money, and what the net proceeds is. What a lot of clubs do, for instance, I use the fireworks as an example. In East Hampton, the fire department runs the fireworks. We do the food. We give the fire department a donation based on the food, based on our profit from selling the food. We discuss that at the board meeting, and then we bring it to the general membership. How much do we want to donate from that? At the end of the fiscal year, you should give a complete report. What came in on both admin and on activities, what came in, what you spent, and what the leftover is. Lions International would like you to spend it. A lot of clubs does carry it over a portion to the others. IRS Form 990 is due by November 15th. please make sure you fill it out. There's a fine of $10 a day that can be assessed. Several years ago, many clubs lost their 501c4 status because they were 3 years behind. We don't want to go through that again. Once you lose your status, it's really tough to get it reimbursed, to get it back, and you could also be fined for a considerable amount. At the same time, check with your Secretary of State and make sure your incorporation is up to date. They don't always send bills, and your club wants to be incorporated because, God forbid, if you get sued and you're not incorporated, they can go after you personally as being one of the officers of the club. So make sure that your IRS form is filled out on time, along with your incorporation papers. You can go online at the Secretary of State's office, go in under Concord, and you should be able to find your club. You do have to search because it may say, for instance, East Hampton Lions, or it could say Lions Club of East Hampton. Sometimes you have to play around with it. If you are a 501c3, then you have 2 forms with the IRS and you have 2 forms with the Secretary of State. Next slide, please. What most clubs do is the treasurer sends out the club treasurer report in advance via email to the members. That can save an embarrassment. If you made a mistake, someone will probably send you an email and say, hey, Joe, what about this or that? So it's not brought up in the meeting. At the board of directors meetings, some clubs insist that they bring the reconciled bank statement, and it's more detailed. Again, periodically throughout the year, you should compare where you're at to your budget. If you have a fundraiser and you estimate that you're gonna make $5,000 and you only make $3,000, you're gonna have to adjust your budget. If you're lucky and you make $7,000, then you'll have extra money. The budget is only a guide, but you do have to use it as a guide throughout the year, not just at the beginning and not at the end. Payments of general interest. Occasionally, all of us will receive requests during the year. Someone wants money that's not on your budget. You look and you see if you can afford it. What occasionally a club will do, if it's a fairly large request, they'll just say, geez, we don't have it, but we'll work on a fundraiser with you. If the Boy Scouts, or let's use the Little League, if the Little League wants dugouts, geez, maybe have a spaghetti dinner, let them sell the tickets, and you'll give them the profit from it, rather than just say, geez, you can't turn it out. So there's ways you can work. Think outside the box. Paula, are there any questions?
Yes, Mary. We did have a question from Ray Shinkwitz at the Canterbury Club, my club. He's asking, as far as events and chairpersons, should they provide a budget, or should that be something locally established?
The chairperson should draft the budget and submit it to the finance committee. Then it should go to the board of directors.
Okay, thank you. That's
Okay.
the only one, right?
Okay. If there's any others, put your hand up.
So the other thing that I just wanted to mention real quick, Mary, while we're waiting for another question, Mary talked about some of the treasure aspects. One thing that we didn't cover is we've had from time to time, unfortunately, a club treasurer die in the middle of office. please make sure that there's a second person in your club that's aware of how the books are being kept. And if they're on computer particularly, that someone else is able to have that password or login and able to get that. We've had a couple clubs that it was miserable being able to try to recreate some of the club activities for that treasurer account, just because there was only one person that had done it forever and a day and they didn't have that. So just kind of keep that in mind.
Good
Paul,
point.
question?
Yes, Kate is asking if a Lion donates during a fundraiser, which account does that donation go to? Does
Fundraiser
it go
would be
into the admin fund?
activities. If it's a fundraiser and the public is there, it should go to activities. Now, that's the legal answer. Occasionally, what a club will do when they have a fundraiser is the Lions that are participating, they'll put it in admin. It is taboo, but it does get done. If you're 501c3, I would not do it. If you have a fundraiser and it's a 501c3, then everything has to go to 501c3 and not your admin account. Okay, how are you going to keep the books? If you're a small club, an Excel spreadsheet works great. You have one for admin and you have one for activities. You can have a column for your income, a column for your expenses, and then just itemize what it is. You can also do it under Word. You can, if you want, be a little more technical. I don't think many use Clubmate or Peachtree anymore. The district is on QuickBooks. For the district, I love QuickBooks. Everything is itemized and you know exactly where you stand, and there's less chance of making an error with QuickBooks. But for when I was treasurer of East Hampton, I found the Excel spreadsheet works great. If anyone would like any help with either one of them, please don't hesitate to either call PCC Ken or myself. Next slide. Annual audit. Actually, it shouldn't be an annual audit. I would say at the 6th month, also do an audit. It's just a check to make sure everything is done correctly and everything is done right. Everyone makes mistakes. You know, occasionally, as district treasurer, I'll make a mistake. I'll write a check out of charities when it should be to admin. I'll catch myself and I'll reimburse it. Okay. At the end of the year, you want to know exactly where you stand. Have all checks cleared? We currently have one check outstanding from our Peace Poster contest that hasn't been. I'm trying to work with them to make sure that it gets done. When I turn over the district treasurer books to the next treasurer, I want to make sure that it's complete and everything is accurate. And it should be an annual audit by other people in your club. They should check over your bank statement, and they also should check over the receipts and make sure that everything is done properly, and they should make sure that you filled out the 990 correct, along with make sure that your Secretary of State is forward. We recently had an issue where we sent a check to Lions International for $49. When we got our bank statement, we saw that they deducted $449. It was a key error that they made. It went through our account, and now we couldn't check with LCI because LCI is remotely and that department is not taking any calls. So we went to Citizens Bank where we had our account and they corrected it for us. So you want to make sure that everything is correct. Things do happen, and with an audit, you'll catch it. Who should be familiar with it? When you have a fundraiser, the fundraising chair, along with their committee, should know the finances. The board of directors should have full knowledge. And then the outgoing and the incoming treasurer should have a full understanding. You should sit down with your outgoing treasurer, go over the books, see how they do it, and make sure that there's a good understanding. As far as dues, who in your club collects them? At one point, it was up to the secretary to receive the dues and then give them to the treasurer. It was a check and balance. Most of the time, it goes directly to the treasurer. Ask your district treasurer, your outgoing district treasurer, what your club does. And today is June 20th. The bills are going to be going out in 12 days. Does your club have enough dues in to pay your dues? Probably not. So if your dues hasn't gone out, please expedite it. I know our president is asking our treasurer to send them out, because in our club, the treasurer sends them out. Next slide. Okay, membership categories and dues. There's a great chart that you're going to be receiving that will explain to you what the membership categories are and what the dues are. Life members, there's the official life member where they're a member from Lions International. With a life membership, the club would pay $750 if the person meets the criteria. Now, what some clubs do is if a club member is quite elderly, they make, rather than make a life membership with LCI, they do a club life membership. If someone is 80, you don't want to pay, or you may not be able to or want to pay Lions International $750. So what some clubs will do is they'll make them a club life member where the club agrees internally just to pay that person's dues. If you do that, make darn sure the person knows about it, because if they transfer to another club, guess what? They're not a life member and they will be expected to pay. When you receive your membership dues from International, you're going to receive a membership roster. Review it. Make sure that people are on it accurately. If you have a family member, make sure it's coded family member. If they're a life member, make it. If you dropped Joe Smith and they're still on it, drop them. Unfortunately, every member that's on as of June 30th is what you're going to pay for. It doesn't make a difference if the secretary completes the June monthly report July 2nd, or if you should have dropped John Doe in June and your secretary forgot to, you gotta pay it. So it pays to go over your roster and reconcile it so you won't have to pay again. Going forward, July 1st, they are waiving the membership application fee for members. So any member that you bring in July 1st or after, you will not have to pay a membership fee for. You still got to pay the dues, but you don't have to pay the membership. Next slide, please. Committee. The timing, you should be doing it now because it takes time. A lot of the banks are insisting that there be minutes listing who's going to be on the bank account. Those persons are going to have to go to the bank and sign signature cards. You should meet with them and turn over the books, including the checkbook. QuickBooks, if you have it on your home computer, you should transfer it over along with the ledgers. Bank statements, receipts, and correspondence should be put in a book that says 2019 to 2020. So in years to come, if there's questions, that'll be there. Next slide. Any more questions?
Mary, I do have a couple questions and a comment.
Okay.
Jennifer is wondering if there's someone special, or is there somewhere to find software, or the club need to purchase that themselves?
The club would have to purchase it.
Okay, great. And Paul from Coventry wanted to share that they recently started using Google Drive and Google Docs to share all their information. Has been very successful with that. And Ray from the Canterbury Club wants to know about what happens if the chairperson doesn't give the treasurer's receipts.
They don't get paid. Very simple. No receipts, no payment.
Again, remember what I had mentioned earlier in the thing, the club may have a limit where they don't need a receipt for a small token purchase, as long as it's approved. But if the club has a limit of $25 or $50 or $100, there's no check that gets cut without that receipt being supplied back to the treasurer.
Yeah.
That's the checks and balances that we talked about.
If they're 501c3 though, then there's no flexibility.
Right, you have to show the receipt.
Yep. As far as the Google Drive,
Okay, that's all we have for the moment.
DG Elect Frank, can you talk about the Google Drive? I'm not overly familiar with it.
There's several ways that you can save documents. OneDrive is one, Google Drive is another, and it's a good place if you want to share documents with other people that they can certainly access it if you give them the access to. It's nice to have someplace in the cloud, so to speak, so that people aren't locked into, oh, gee, I forgot the computer over here and I don't have access to it, or I forgot the thumb drive. So the Google Drive is just being able to save something on the cloud. They do have Google software, but in order to get the full advantage, there is a fee for any of the software that you're using. Microsoft, Quicken Books, Google Docs, there's some things that you have to pay for in order to get the full services.
Paul, does that answer your question? Shake your head. I can't see you, but Paula can.
Oh, yeah, that does. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay.
Currently, no other questions.
Okay, I guess we can turn this over to DG Elect Frank.
Well, let me take the opportunity first to thank both PCC Ken and PDG Mary for the webinar. It was fantastic. I actually learned a few things myself today. So thank you very much for taking the time. I'm absolutely sure everyone else is walking away with a lot of knowledge. So thank you for that. So at this time, we will invite District Governor-elect Frank to give us a few closing remarks. Again, the webinar is being recorded. We'll put that out in a week or so. I want to thank all the attendees for taking the time out today. And we look forward to kind of doing this together in good fellowship, hopefully sometime in the near future. All right, you got it, Frank.
Thank you, Pete. Okay, thank you, PDG Keith. I appreciate all your efforts in organizing these and making them as successful as they are. PDG Mary and PCC Ken, it's been a great presentation. There's a lot of information, and it's new to many of us. And special thanks for taking the time to join with us. Hey, this is certainly time well invested. To DG Diana and PDG Mary, they have been a force to be reckoned with this year. We've had a challenging year, but very successful thanks to DG Diana. She's had many obstacles and challenges, but we've accomplished a lot as a result of her successful application for an LCI grant, which enabled us to serve our communities with many urgent needs. As treasurer, you are a key member of the team. And I'm going to address you just as I did the presidents and the secretaries, because we all have a lot of challenges ahead, but I'm confident that we're going to have a great Lions year. In the jungle, lions are not the largest or the heaviest animal. They are not the smartest or the most intelligent. By far, the elephant is larger and more intelligent. However, the lion is still considered to be the king of the jungle. And a lot of that, the reason being, is attitude. As Lions, we aren't the richest organization in the world, but we have the advantage of being the largest service organization in the world. And we have taken on many elephant-like tasks, and we've been successful. We're able to do more with less because we are able to put our resources in the capable hands of the right lions with the right attitude. We have been consistent and a powerful force for our communities and humanities. We have accomplished so much since Melvin Jones had the simple idea of gathering some small business organizations and band them together for the greater good and to give back to their communities. We have earned the respect around the globe for what we've been able to accomplish. We've succeeded through wars, crashes, depressions, and other global turmoil. We are still succeeding, but we must adapt to a changing world. And today is a great example. Although many of us may miss the coffee and donuts during the breaks, it's still a great feeling to know that we are all united in our spirit of service. We are learning to adapt to the 21st century, and we must adapt. Think about the giants we grew up with over the last century. Giants who did adapt, such as Blockbuster Video, which was surpassed by Netflix and Redbox, Kodak Film, which controlled many of our pictures and the film for many years, but couldn't keep up in the digital age. Sears, whose products were and may still be in many of our homes. Our downtown and malls are not the magnets that they once were. We moved into our second century using the same model that we've used for the last 100 years. Our community service and our involvement are still the mainstays of that model. Our helping hands need to find new ways to reach out, and it's disappointing that we can't easily shake someone's hand or pat them on the back in reassurance or give a pat on the back of gratitude for those who we serve. My concern is that we're allowing our fears to affect our attitude, especially of technology. We often say, if you want something done on the computer or through social media, get a hold of your grandchild. However, how many grandparents have mastered Facebook and have used it to communicate with their family members all over the state, country, and even the world? How many youngsters keep shifting their programs or platforms because their parents keep finding them and adopting those programs? Recently, our Lions Club's International Vice President, Brian Sheehan, mentioned that we are about 10 years ahead in the use of technology as a result of the pandemic. So therefore, we do have one silver lining on this period that we've gone through. Too many of us are succumbing to the misbelief that we are getting too old to do the service projects needed for our community. This is an attitude more than a reality. What drove that home to me was when I was in Chicago in January going through governor training. There was one governor from New York who was 80 years old, and there was one governor from Portugal who was 90 years old. There's also a misbelief that our young people don't want to serve. I'd like to have you recall the movie Miracle Worker. Many immediately think of Helen Keller, who we know became a powerful and positive force for the blind, handicapped, and yes, altered the focus of our organization's first century, making a difference in countless lives. However, the movie was about Annie Sullivan, who was her teacher and friend. Helen Keller was frustrated by her inability to express herself. She frequently threw tantrums that included breaking dishes and even slapping and biting family members. When she was 6 years old, she tipped over a cradle holding her baby sister. Helen's parents knew something had to be done. Annie Sullivan came into her life and through patience and perseverance, brought order to Helen Keller's chaotic life. As a result, she gave the world a woman of powerful influence. You are our Annie Sullivans of today. We all have some difficult Helen Kellers in our lives. It's time for you to recognize the potential in all our Lions, and to those who would be great Lions if you patiently and persistently work with all of them to make them a positive influence on our communities. You will be the example. You will set the tone. You will influence our Lions because you have the right attitude. I look forward to working together through the year to serve our Lions as they serve our communities. I'm sure you are up to the challenge, and so are our Lions. Let's give them the opportunity. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, TG Frank. Again, thank you to everyone attending today's webinar. I hope you guys get out there and enjoy the rest of the day. Take care.